Hi guys, today we have a guest on the channel and it is Mr. Seth White. Is your last name actually White?
It is actually white, yes, like the color.
Cool name. That's a really cool name.
I
So-
sense some sarcasm with
no, no,
that.
no, no, no. I swear no. It's just like with my name, I feel like already it's like Nate, then Ahmad. It doesn't, it doesn't go well. If I'm gonna become a singer, it doesn't make sense. At least
I see, yeah, because it's so
that's why.
simple. I'm like related to Snow White. Like
Yeah,
anything goes
maybe
with white.
related. So I'm really glad to have you here. I thought, we're both, trans men, I thought it would be nice to talk about how that really has shaped us in the sense of like personal development, maybe mental health, how that really has played a part. And yeah, kind of just discussing your experiences. So
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
yeah. First, to start off, if you'd like to introduce yourself, just tell us a bit about you and what you've been up to, what you're working on.
Cool. Yeah. So I am Seth. I'm 30 years old. I'm an old man, getting up there. Starting to feel a little bit like Santa Claus with my beard going on.
I'm
I was
jealous.
actually working with some children in my former job at the Boys and Girls Club, and they would call me Santa Claus, like legitimately, which kind of made me chuckle. But yeah, what have I been up to? So I've been going through this like surgical process with bottom surgery for the past few years. I'm unfortunately still not done. I've got another surgery coming up in May. So that's been like a really big focal point in my life over the past few years. It's taken up a lot of time and resources and stuff, but I'm almost done. I'm super grateful. I just started a business with a buddy of mine, another trans guy, and we are really excited. Right now we've just got some apparel on there, but we have some big plans. I'll just say it on your channel because we're kind of trying to keep it on the low, but we've got some cool ideas. We want to do like a phalloplasty underwear. There's nothing that exists. We want to create like an erectile device for people who have had phalloplasty because the only ones that exist are created for cis men. And I don't know if you know this, but to have the surgery to like get the erectile device implanted inside you, there's like crazy complications that can come up. That's kind of where we're going with this, but yeah, it's been a really fun project with him and getting that going. And yeah, just chilling, working with COVID. I mean, can't really go out these days too much, so that's what I've been up to.
That's so cool. I didn't even I'm glad to get the inside scoop.
Yeah.
Really
I
cool
hope he's
products.
okay with me saying it, but it's like, I don't know, nobody's gonna like fly in and like watch your video and be like, I'm gonna steal that idea.
No one's even going to know how to do it. Like I'm just there like I should have thought of that, but how? Like how are you doing it? So no, I think you're good. But it's really cool to hear, and I think it's great because you kind of started this business during COVID, right? I mean, how has that been? Like, has that hindered you? Has that been a blessing in a way, or?
Oh, that's a good question. I had like a personal training business before, but it was very different. So I'm not really sure what to compare it to. Like, I don't know if it would be different with COVID not going on, but I certainly feel like we have a lot more time on our hands to work on it. And both of us, he's working corrections. That's actually where I used to work as well. I've had many jobs and I don't think he loves it. It's not the best place to work. So one of our goals is to work for ourselves. And I'm sure you know this as a YouTuber. One of the ways to do that is to build different income sources. This business, not only will it be, of course, hopefully an income source for us both, but it'll also be a way for us to give back to the community. We're giving 10% of proceeds to Trans Santa, which is a really cool organization that is providing gifts for marginalized youth in our community. And like, sky's the limit. Like if we make enough money, we can give back even more. And that's ideally what we want to do, and create products for non-binary and trans people that, don't exist or are hard to find, or you know what I mean? There's a lot of gaps that exist that we want to try to help fill.
That's great. I mean, I didn't even know that there was that organization. So we're learning a lot today. I'm gonna even include some links to those, to the business and to the organization as well, because I think that's really good to know and resources to have. Yeah, speaking of trans youth. I'd love to know, because I feel like I actually don't know your story that well. I followed you from when you already started your transition. You know, you're well on. You already had top surgery, everything. So why don't you tell us a bit more about how you came to realize you were trans and how that whole process went with family, friends, everything.
Cool, yeah. Okay, so when I was a child, I didn't know what transgender was, but I always did feel like a boy, and I would actually express that. I would be like, hey, I'm a boy, to friends, to my parents even. So I always knew, but as I got older and closer to puberty, I just felt like it was evil. You know, we talked about this before, but I grew up in a religious family, and I had an uncle who was gay who died of AIDS, and so I was like terrified. I was like, oh, all people from that community must die terrible deaths as punishment, and I don't want to go to hell and all these things. So I tried to bury it all very deep down and just sort of accept the body that I had and the way that I'm supposed to go about living in the world in that body, so to speak. But yeah, I think in high school I came across the video of the pregnant man. I don't know if you remember that. It was on some terrible show like Maury or something.
I heard about that because it was like on like front page newspaper in Malaysia.
Yeah, and I was like, what is this? And I found out the person was transgender, and that exposure was my first time like learning about a trans person, really, other than like all of the sort of evil things I've heard through like religion and that sort of thing. And I was a little bit off put by that even, so I just tried to avoid again. And then in college, like right around the age of 17 or 18, I came across a lot of YouTube channels with trans guys, and it was a very similar experience to yours that you were talking about, where like you saw that they're normal people, they're not like crazy or evil, or you know what I mean, like a serial killer or something. Because I feel like not only religion but like the media portrays trans people as just like awful, and I think that's slowly changing, but definitely back then, like,
yeah, it was the worst thing.
It was the worst thing, and it was just seen as so bad. And I was like, wow, like it just really clicked for me, and they looked so authentic. Not like, I shouldn't say they looked so authentic. It wasn't just that, like they just looked so comfortable in themselves.
Yeah, I get what you.
Yeah, I had never really felt that, and I started watching more and more videos, and I realized like that's who I am deep down, and I've always known that since I was a child. And so I, went the whole medical route, and
Pretty late.
Sorry?
Like it's actually pretty, like, not late, but like I thought you, I don't know, realized you were trans and like started at least social transition from like 15, like that.
No. And I think it's because of my age. Like, we're not too far off in age, but like when I was in high school, there weren't very many trans people. Nobody talked about it other than in like the negative way. Like it wasn't really a thing at the time. So I just didn't really know what was available to me, and I didn't have any resources, really.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's so funny because I think back to that story of the pregnant man, and I actually don't remember what I even thought about it at the time. I was really young, and I don't even know if I realized that they were trans. Like I just thought it was some weird thing going on, like another weird thing the US, like the West is doing, and like I thought it was just a cis man who got pregnant somehow. I don't know what I even thought, but yeah.
Those crazy Americans, what are they doing now?
Crazy American. But I want to actually get your opinion on this, because I know many who usually are against us would bring up. Do you feel that if you didn't come across these exposures and like the media, that you would have still realized you're trans, or like, how they think that the media makes you think you're trans when you're not, and you wouldn't have done this otherwise? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think that I would have had the realization so fast. It probably would have taken me a lot longer, but that feeling that I had would have never gone away. Like the way that I've kind of understood it now for myself anyway, because everybody's experience is very different, but I feel like people within the transgender community are very much just like non-binary. Like we just do not subscribe to the programming of like what it is to be male or female. And I went through this experience where like I tried to be ultra feminine, and then that didn't work, and then I tried to be ultra masculine when I transitioned, and that was not me either. And like over time I realized, hey, like I can just be me. Like I can just dress how I want to dress, express myself the way that I want to express myself. If I want to have surgeries, that's my freaking right. If I want to like go on hormones, that's my right. It's my body. I can do what I want with it. And for people who, like, I know there's a lot of, what are they called? Radical feminists who just are totally, like, against us and we're all brainwashed. But, like, it's no different to me than the argument of, like, you know, women should be able to make the decision to have an abortion if they want to. It's their body. So if you believe in that as a feminist, then you have to understand that, like, we all have the right to do whatever we want with our own bodies. And when you're policing that, then that is actually contributing to, like, that patriarchal society that tries to control everybody and put them in boxes. That's kind of where I feel is the case for myself anyway, if that makes sense.
Definitely agree with you that I feel like without the media and without those like people that we see online, like, yeah, you're not going, it's not that it's never going to be realized, it's just it would have been realized way too late maybe, you know, like grateful for it. Like personally for me, my dad would even think like if we just never came to Malaysia, this only happened because we moved away from our home country and stayed in Jordan, you know, you wouldn't have this wouldn't have happened. And to me, I'm like, I think I still would have realized because I still have internet and YouTube. I think it just would have been so much harder for me to come to terms with it because I'd be in a much more unaccepting place, right? So it's like the knowledge is still there, it's just like how you process it that really, how fast in and how, so I mean, I'm glad that you were able to eventually, and I agree there isn't, like I think that's what I like about being trans, I guess sometimes, especially as I guess more on the masculine side or like men or whatever, like I don't have any issues not being the most macho guy around sometimes and liking I don't know, High School Musical and
you know, like, there's no rules and there shouldn't be.
Exactly, and like I feel like I'm much more free, right? But in that sense, I mean, I would want to know for you, how do you feel? I want to like phrase this correctly, but I guess what has been the positives for you of being trans, and then at the same time, are there any negatives that you can think about, or have they all become positives now?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. And I wanted to say too about our point earlier. Like, I think it's unfair when people make that assumption that, you know, because we're being exposed to trans people online, that's making us trans. We're finally getting representation. Everybody else has representation online, in movies, in music. Does that automatically make you like that person? Does that automatically make you like society wants you to be? Not necessarily. You know what I mean? So it's no different. You know who you are at your core. And you know, when you see other people like you, it can help to bring out that truth. And I think that's our experience. And there's nothing wrong with that.
I agree.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But so the really beautiful thing for me about being transgender is that it's like taught me radical self-love. And it's still something I'm on a journey with. I do still have dysphoria sometimes. I do still not like parts of myself, and you know, there are parts of myself I don't always accept, but I'm like going through this process for me myself, and I feel like for many other trans people, we kind of have to step away from caring about what other people think. It's really hard, but like we kind of do have to do that, and when you do that, it's kind of freeing in a way, and it allows you to like see different parts of yourself and to really learn who you are, I guess. And I think that's been a really cool and freeing thing for me. The negative side of things would definitely be, you know, people's kind of discriminatory opinions or actions towards us. I mean, look at what's going on in the US, for example. There's been like 50 bills targeting trans youth, and then never mind other countries. Like I honestly don't even know. So that's hard.
I agree. Like I think sometimes about like the legal, like a lot of the trans struggle is just getting through the legal system and like correcting all your papers. And I feel like maybe here in Canada it's a bit easier. They actually have a system for it and recognize as trans people. But like in other countries, like you said, they don't accept. And it's like the only reason we have so many hoops to go through is because they are man-made. Like, what is a piece of paper? What is this like card that says mine? Just change it. It's not a big deal. You know, it's like sometimes I think about it, I'm like, what is the big deal? Just change the name, change the marker. Why it's such a huge issue, you know? So okay, that's my rant. But
no, yeah, it's all kind of bullshit, really. It's bureaucratical and it makes it harder. So it's like more difficult for people to go through the process and. I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, like in that sense, like in terms of your, let's say, like your mental health and personal development, is there any characteristics, for example, or like skills you've developed that you feel like are somehow directly linked back to like your identity or your journey as a trans person?
I would say courage, you know, to speak my truth, because that's not an easy thing to do sometimes, and I would attribute that to transitioning. Like that was really hard, and all of the steps, you know, have been hard, and dynamics with different people. But you know, I feel like on one hand it's really helped me in my journey to love myself more and to be myself and to speak my truth. But at the same time, I always do wonder what it would be like to not have to go through the medical process and like putting all of your focus on this process where like you don't have the bandwidth for other things. Like I never did super well in school. I was very apathetic about a lot of stuff, and I do wonder like maybe I wouldn't have been that way if I wasn't so stressed and like dealing with all this trauma related to my gender. So there's that too, which I would say is kind of a negative piece as well. I just wonder like what things would be different if I was born, you know, a cis man and I felt comfortable right off the bat with most of myself.
No, definitely. I can relate to that a lot. You know, like growing up, same thing, right? You think about these things, and because some trans people grow up and they really know that they're trans and they're fighting from it from like a very young age. Like they're fighting to transition in some form, right? Whereas for us, like there's a point where we like pushed it away, pretend it didn't exist, maybe. And like at that point, it's like even though you might have appeared, I think we talked about it in the previous, like the other video we did for your channel, which is like how you are a good actor, and you just like you go across the years of your life and no one really knows what's going on, and you seem okay, but when we look back at it, it feels like you weren't really there. Like you were there, but you weren't there. Like you weren't experiencing those things.
The word for it is dissociation. I dissociated like for a lot of time, and you know, as a result I have a lot of memory issues. You know, there are definitely, sorry, my foot's cramping up. There are definitely some mental health struggles that come along with this that, you know, are pretty hard, and anxiety, you know. When I was first dating after my divorce, because I was with my ex-wife when I first started my transition, so I had never gone through like the dating process, having to tell someone. And as soon as we divorced and I was ready to start dating again, I was like, whoa, like this is gonna take me right out of my comfort zone. I'm so worried about it. Yeah, the anxiety that came with that, it was crazy. I don't know if you experienced that.
I mean, yeah, definitely. I had a similar experience. Like my first ever like kind of relationship I was pre-transition, but like know that I am, and then like breaking up after that. I think a lot of like my issue with the breakup wasn't the breakup itself, but just like being like, who am I gonna find who's actually gonna be okay with me and like love me and all that, you know. But and it worked out in uni, you know, like I found someone else, and even though that's over as well, at least now I know that it's not hard. I mean, it's not as easy as probably like being cis, but I feel like it helps us filter out a lot of people as well, and get possibly more meaningful relationships.
I totally agree with that, 100%. Because if you think about it, like all of those people who are like, I don't want to date you, you're trans, and they don't even like, it would be different I'd be okay with someone not wanting to date me, but not making a big deal out of it, and still maybe wanting like a friendship, you know, or something like that. But if someone's so shitty that they're just like, ew, like I don't want to talk to you, you don't want that person in your life. And cis people may not be able to experience that red flag right off the bat. They're gonna experience it like down the road, which sucks.
Yeah, and like actually, like because we were earlier talking about like how it'd be to transition, to be born as like you know cis male and whatever. Like I feel like even though that would make our lives easier, I feel like what if what if we're like less interesting? You know, it's just like what if you don't have that drive in you as much anymore. Like I know me as my own personality, I feel like a lot of like the positive qualities that I see in myself nowadays or people see in me are literally a result of having to fight for myself and like stand up to my family. Whereas otherwise, like I said, I went through schooling, like that there but not there, but like I was always happy with the bare minimum. And I feel like that was my personality, which is obviously not everyone, maybe that's just me. So I feel like probably if I was a cis guy with that same personality, that would have carried on into like my adulthood, just kind of like settling for the minimum. And I don't really like that idea like anymore.
Yeah, for sure.
But I feel like also the big thing that comes up is the respect that we have for other people and the compassion and especially like respecting women. I want to get your opinion on this because a lot of people like would say like because I'm a trans man, I respect women or like I'm good with women as well in non-PG-13 ways because I'm like because I was a female and I don't like I don't want to say my opinion first, so I want you to like, what do you think about that statement? Do you think that's an accurate thing to say?
Sorry, in non-PG-13 ways? You mean like
PG-13 and also just like the respecting women like generally. You know how some guys can be uncomfortable to be around for certain women, and some guys might say that we don't do that because we know what it's like as females.
I think I see where you're going. I think because we were socialized as women, we have some of the same experiences, or we know what it's like maybe to be catcalled, or like things that guys tend to do, not all guys, but a lot of guys do, that they don't necessarily see a problem with. We have that like insight to be like, okay, I understand why that wouldn't be okay because I've experienced it and made me uncomfortable or whatever. But I don't necessarily feel that like being transgender makes you a good person or like appropriate with women. It's you know what I mean? Like it's something that you still need to work on for sure, and being a good person and respecting people and respecting boundaries, all of that stuff, that's totally separate than your transition. But I do think being socialized as a woman, like you're not going to be maybe as aggressive and come on to women in the same way that a lot of guys would, and you're not going to be creepy in the same ways, you know what I mean? Like you mentioned it in our last video and you said like I sometimes don't know how to approach women, or like I'm not able to talk to them because I don't want to come off creepy and I don't want to make them uncomfortable. I 100% feel the same way. Like I've had experiences where like walking home after school, it's late at night and there's a woman walking and she's like looking back, and then I notice, oh, it's because of me, so I'll cross the street. Like things like that, you know what I mean?
I get you.
Yeah.
You actually answered it in a way that I didn't think about, which is true, that just because you're trans doesn't mean you're appropriate with people, doesn't mean that you can respect everyone. And I think it's for me, like personally, my experience, it's so funny because despite not really knowing it from a very young age, I feel like I cannot relate to women at all when they talk about the catcalling, like just certain experiences that they've had, even things that I should kind of relate on. I feel like I had such a different experience with all of this that I just wasn't mentally there. I went through the motions of it. I didn't really identify with it. Like I never had that fear of men, even though I've seen them be creepy and whatever, but I always felt like if you talk to me, I'm gonna punch you in the face kind of thing. Like I walk on the street till now, I walk like ready for anyone to be like, maybe it's a bad thing, but I'm like, are you gonna mug me? Are you gonna hurt me? I'm ready. No, but like I personally cannot be like, oh, I know what it's like to be treated in this way, so I know not to do that. I feel like it's more personally for me, more of because I was socialized as female, so I had friendships with women, and so I saw and I heard stories from them. Whereas typically, especially if you're a cis, like straight cis guy, you grow up around, your closest friends are guys. That's all most of what you hear, and so you don't don't ever hear it from the women's side. You get me?
Yeah.
So it's not because there are decent straight cis male men, and it's because I feel like usually they have girlfriends or they have sisters. That's why they tend to be a bit more aware of the social aspect. Obviously, you can't blame someone for not being aware of the biological stuff. You know, that's not your fault. But the social aspect, I feel like it's not accurate to just be like, oh, it's because. You know, that because that makes it easy for cis guys to get a pass, in my opinion. Because it's like, oh, I don't know what it's like to be a girl, so how should I know? Like, no, like you should. Like, it's not hard to be a good person.
You don't have to be born a woman to know that, like, you should be respectful towards all human beings, including women.
Yeah, like, you don't need to be born as someone to respect them. I think that applies to everything. That could be race as well, you know, not being racist, not discriminating. I think that's one of the things I'm grateful for.
Yeah, no, I when you said that, I didn't even think about it, but for sure. It's like, especially as like a white person, I don't experience a lot of the same barriers as other trans people of color might experience. And so I do acknowledge that, like, if I wasn't transgender, I would have very little awareness of other people's struggles. I would be very much like a lot of my family who really just are completely in their own little bubble. But being transgender, experiencing barriers, and then like you just get more involved with the community and you meet all kinds of different people, and it just allows you to see other people's journeys and what they go through.
Definitely. That's so true. Actually, like, because you brought up family there, was your family always accepting of you? I don't know if we actually talked about that.
No, we didn't. My mom had a really hard time. Yeah, she was super attached to me being like her daughter, but she never outright was like, no, I don't accept you, if that makes sense. I just think it took her a while to process and come to terms with my transition. My dad and I are not close. We've always kind of had a difficult relationship, but for whatever reason, he totally accepted me right off the bat, so that was great. Very bizarre, but yeah, he was great about it, and he always has been. He's never said anything that's been problematic about my transition. And my brother has always been there for me. He's always like supported me. It's just more like extended family, like I was talking about in our last video. I have some very religious family, which there's nothing wrong with being very religious. They just have always had an issue with me as a person because of who I am. And it's hard because it's like, if you have a problem with who I am as a person and like parts of me, then like you don't really love me. That's very conditional love. You know what I mean? So I have struggled with that, but in general, I've had a good experience, I would say, like compared to a lot of people.
So I guess to wrap it up, because this was very I winged through this, but to wrap it up, I guess, in your lifetime, your journey, it doesn't have to be trans related, could be. Up till now, 30 years, what has been the biggest lesson that you've learned for life that you would want to share with someone as like advice, let's say?
I think I spoke to it a little bit earlier, but just like to love yourself is so huge, and to accept yourself is so huge, because I know we were talking about like as trans people, maybe we're good actors and we can try to like fit in with what other people want, but ultimately I feel like everybody does that. And it's because like there's just like a certain way, like maybe it varies from culture to culture, but there's always like a certain way to be that is like acceptable, that your family wants, that the rest of society wants. But you know what? Not everybody is going to be that person, and that's okay. And I think what's beautiful about humanity is that we're all so different, and it can cause a lot of problems too. But if we could see that as like a benefit and a beautiful thing, I think that would help us to thrive a little bit more and not live in such a violent world that's got a lot of scarcity and inequalities. Just realizing like we're all so different, and that really comes down to accepting yourself and doing a lot of like inner work too, because when like no matter what, even if your family really loves you, they're gonna program you a certain way, and you're gonna learn behaviors from your family that maybe aren't so great. So if we all did that inner work and like really try to focus on being our best selves, which isn't always possible, but like, trying to strive for that, man, what a beautiful world we would have. And that's something that I've just realized over time. It doesn't necessarily have to do with my transition, but I know for like a lot of people who are viewing me now, they might see like, that I've like gone down, or I don't even know. I'm not doing as well as I was a few years ago, but it's not true. It may appear that way because I'm living in my parents' basement, and you know, I've gone through some stuff with surgeries. It's kind of thrown me back a little bit, but I've done so much work on myself. I'm such a happier person and more accepting of myself than I've ever been. And I wish that for everyone. Truly, I do.
Exactly. There's nothing wrong with living in the basement. I would go back and live with my family right now if I could. But no, yeah, that's such a great message, honestly, and it's so true. Like loving yourself and, you know, putting yourself first, but obviously without endangering others, right? It's such a freeing thing that everyone should do, trans or cis. I feel like that is something we have the privilege of sometimes as trans people, because we already take that step to transition. We're more comfortable with taking other steps that are not related to that, if you get me. Whereas, you know, some other people might still be trying to battle that and trying to like juggle parents and their wants. But I think ultimately, yeah, doing you.
As long as anyone else.
It's so good to hear, and I'm really glad you're doing well and better mentally. And thank you so much for being on this video. And it was really nice to get to know you better and know your story a bit more.
Thanks for having me. It was awesome connecting with you and doing these videos.
And of course, Seth has his own channel, which we also did another video on, where we talked about my experiences more. And he also has other videos where he documents his transition and like does Q&As and life updates. So I will link that below. And I'll also link in their, you know, business website. What's the company called again?
We are Whiterson Co Limited.
Very cool. So yes, I'll link that below as well. They have very nice beard oil. Makes my face smell so good.
Oh yeah, I sent you some.
Yeah, you did.
I'm so glad you liked it. We actually don't have any for sale on the site yet, but we will very soon.
Subscribe to their newsletter. I hope you have a newsletter set up. So yeah.
Bye everybody.